Welcome back to another episode of Good Things with myself, Brent Lindeque. I am excited! I say that every week, and I seem to get more excited every time I say it. But I have Mandy Wiener on the show today. She is a friend. She is a colleague. I guess I could call her that. And I haven't had her on a podcast since 2020. I went back and looked. I actually listened. Do you remember that podcast?
Yeah, I remember because I was underdressed and I think I'd spilled coffee on my shirt.
You do remember. I love great memory. So we had you on that time. I had you. It was only me at the time. I didn't have this incredible team. But we were chatting about your book that had just come out. It was The Whistleblowers. Yes. We were talking all about The Whistleblowers. And Mandy Wiener, incredible investigative journalist. She's written many books, award-winning. And she does good things for South Africa. I get to play with you sometimes on stage, which is one of my favorite things.
That does sound very dodgy, but yes.
I don't mean it in that way. We get to be on stage together, doing keynotes around the country, where we manage to give a balanced message about balance, which I think is so important in South Africa. You also have me on your Friday show on Midday Reports on 702, where I come in for 10 minutes and sort of end the week with a little bit of good news. Also one of my favorite things to do every week, and I'm very thankful for you and thankful that you give me that opportunity. But Mans, you've written a book, right? And I know that I'm not political. Maybe I don't have a political mind. I don't have the skill set that you do in the line of work that you do. But you invited me to your book launch. And I sat in that audience absolutely in awe, because the book that you've written, The Deal, is interesting. It's funny. There are funny bits. And I think it's very informative as to where we are. It's like a sense check to where we are in South Africa and what we've just gone through. So after my big preamble and my opening, it's great to have you on the show. And I'm just very honored to have you here.
Thank you. It's always such a pleasure to hang out with you, and you're infectious. I'm lucky I get to spend time with you. I'm a big believer in light and shade, and this is something we speak about a lot, where I feel like we can be totally overrun by the negativity, and the media does have a negativity bias.
Yeah.
I am so guilty of that. My job every day is to tell people what's wrong in the country. So I think you need light and shade, and you need that balance. So that's why I enjoy hanging out with you.
Oh, it's always fun. And your book, and that's why we're here to chat today, it has that balance. It's all about the lead up and what happened to bring together what we refer to now as the GNU.
The GNU.
The GNU.
And I use in some of my keynotes this beautiful rainbow GNU, because that's what it is. But you say you're not political, right? I think everybody should be a little bit political. And I'm very clear about the fact that this book was not written for political analysts. It was not written for people who follow the intricacies of politics. I want people to find it accessible, to be able to understand the political landscape, and to actually read it and learn how politics works, because I believe that everybody has a right to know what's going on. These guys are negotiating our future as a country. And you'll know that the data shows that people are sticking their head in the ground. They're choosing not to follow the news and follow politics. It's something we speak about a lot. But I think that you should know, and you should give a damn, and you should be aware, and you should educate yourself. And that's what I try and do in this book.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. So you managed to sit down, I think the number was 27 different ministers, people that work in the political space, and you got to have candid conversations with them about the backstory to how we formulated this new government in South Africa.
Yeah, so radio, I do 3-minute interviews, 4-minute interviews. And the reason that I like to balance that with writing books is I get to sit down with people for hours and let them speak. And I think that a lot of them spoke more than they wanted to speak. In fact, the president, after I interviewed him, said, "Oh, I think I've said a bit much," which is exactly what you like to hear as a journalist. But I wanted to try and speak to as many people as possible. And in the age of parachute journalism, where we have quick hits and we don't have the opportunity to tell a full story, I really tried to do that. And the reason for that was I felt that what happened in South Africa in 2024 was a seminal moment in our history for the first time in 30 years, the monolithic ANC had crumbled. And that meant that our politicians had to find a way to work together. And in 14 days, our elected leaders had to find that way, find that path, and elect a president and form a government. And they were able to do that. That's something that it takes people in Belgium 18 months to do. In Germany, it can take a year for that to happen. So it was remarkable what happened in South Africa. And I believe that we have a right to know, because all of those negotiations took place behind closed doors in smoky rooms at the Nando Club and at the...
What a place to have negotiations.
The deep irony, of course, was that the ANC set up these negotiations at the Nando Club, which is the icon of opulence and colonialism. If you walk up the stairs to the meeting rooms, they are literally horsebacked officers in red coats and images of British colonialist soldiers. So it's deeply ironic. And then at the Enthoven's Westcliff home, and in hotel basements. So I wanted to take people into those rooms, to take them into the meetings at Makhlambo Ndlopfu, the president's residence in Pretoria. And that's what I've tried to achieve here, is really take the average regular citizen, the voter, and let them be in those rooms where their futures are being decided.
So you speak about being a historic moment in South Africa and maybe even the world, that they were able to form this government in such a short amount of time. Do you, and I mean, the answer to this question is already there, but do you believe that South Africans knew how complicated it was from the time that we went into the voting polls until we got that sort of answer as to what was happening with our government? Or do you think people were just a bit blasé, like whatever's going to happen is going to happen?
I think the majority of South Africans were pretty blasé. I think they were like just sitting around waiting for a government to be formed. In the media, of course, we were trying everything to follow every single step and try and get any kind of detail, off the record briefings, sourcing, back channels, all of that stuff to happen. But I think most people didn't really know about what was going on, and they absolutely should know what was going on, because it was so important. But I think that's one of the things I've tried to do here, is to pull back the political veil.
And you write about these negotiations and these meetings and how incredibly complicated they were. It was things happening in boardrooms, and then there were whole entire discussions and plans being created between all the different political players behind the scenes. What was that like?
Yeah, so there were bilateral meetings that were taking place. So the ANC had set up these bilateral meetings where the political parties all went to the Nando Club, and it was like a dentist waiting room where every political party leader had to wait their turn, and there were different meetings taking place in parallel. And then, of course, there were the back channels, and that's where the real stuff happens, because in the back channels you have businessmen who are acting as intermediaries, interlocutors. You know, there's people that are operating, and I think that was important to reflect as well, how much goes on in the back channels. And again, just how complicated this was. So one of the CEOs of one of the big banks in this country said to me, you know, we do mergers and acquisitions on a daily basis. There's best practice, global best practice. We know how to do this. We act as Sherpas or shepherds. And our political leaders were effectively doing this on their own. They were finding their way in the dark. Helen Zille didn't like that comment at all, and said this was neither a merger nor an acquisition. And she says that business people always think that they know better. But what they did was something very unique. And that's why I like to say we have a uniquely Mzansi flavored coalition in what we ultimately emerged with.
Well, those are the words, right? Coalition. Is it a coalition, or is it
It's a coalition.
Yeah.
You know, it's called the Government of National Unity, but I think it's very much a coalition, although that's not what the ANC wants to call it, unless it suits them. The DA likes to think it's a coalition between the ANC and the DA, but the ANC insists it's a Government of National Unity with 10 different partners.
You got to sit down with all these ministers and different political players who, I mean, they were all interesting, right? But maybe what is one of the most interesting stories to come out of the book, that's in the book? And I think I'm alluding to the Gayton McKenzie story.
Listen, there's so many Gayton McKenzie stories. They are so funny. There was one story that he told me that cracked me up, because he spoke about how in the previous election, he was at home watching, because interestingly, all of these different politicians have got their own ritual that they follow to watch the elections come in. And Gayton McKenzie sits at home on his own. No one talks to him, and he bought himself his brand new TV to watch the results on. And things were stalling a bit because often it takes a long time. And he decided to go and have a shower. And while he was in the shower, his girlfriend came to tell him that the Patriotic Alliance had got 3 more seats in Parliament. And he was so excited that he was covered in bubbles and soap and sopping wet that he started dancing naked around his house, dancing because the PA had got 3 more seats. And little did he know that the NEC, the executive of the Patriotic Alliance, had decided to come to his house to watch the results with him. So he was dancing around naked through his house while his colleagues, the executive of this political party, were trying to get into the house. So he had covered his private parts with a pillow and had to run through the back door and like run away and try and hide. And you know, when he tells that story, obviously it's very entertaining. And there were so many stories like that he told that I've included in the book. So there is a bit of levity.
Yeah.
It's not just very serious, dry politics.
Was it tough to interview everybody and to sort of get them to speak about it, or were they all open to telling the story?
So most people were pretty open. The trick was I didn't go in with a camera. So when you go in with just a voice recorder and yourself, people kind of forget that you're recording them, and they are able to speak more freely. And also when you're an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in, people are more inclined to tell the story and speak more openly. There were some that didn't speak openly and were very formal, and there were some that were very generous with their time, with their experiences, their insights. And for me, it's about making the politicians human.
Yeah.
Because so often we just see them on stages and
It's almost like they're not human.
they are. So for me, it was telling stories about how John Steenhuisen woke up in the middle of the night and turned to his wife and said, "I'm not sure we can do this." Or Helen Ziller speaking about the necklace that her granddaughter had given her, and how she wore that through the entire campaign. Or it's about, you know, hearing from the president about how he felt watching the results come in, and the nostalgia of having been at CODESA, and what that meant to him on a personal level. So for me, it was really about making these characters human so that we can truly understand them.
Absolutely. So you speak about the president, and I could never imagine just sitting across from the president
Like this.
and chatting. Like, I could never imagine that. How did you get that interview? Because I've heard that it was
I
pretty
begged, I
tough
pleaded, I
task.
cried. No, I didn't cry. I tried everything. I just kept bugging Vincent Magwenya, who's the president's spokesperson, for months and months and months. I even went for a walk with him in some nature reserve at the south of Joburg, beautiful place. But he walks very fast, so I was like running after him, trying to convince him about this interview. And eventually it came down to like the 11th hour, because the book was about to go to print. It was finished, completely finished, signed off, done. And I got a message from Vincent saying, tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock, get someone to stand in for you. She said, get City to stand in for you on your radio show. If it doesn't happen now, it's not going to happen, basically. And I just...
Well, you dropped everything.
Yeah, I
I'm
dropped
sure.
everything. So I dropped absolutely everything. And I did an interview with the president. And the president rarely gives interviews. Like, he hardly ever gives interviews. It was quite clear, the parameters, that it was all retrospective, nothing about current affairs. And we covered that period that I write about. And he was really interesting. He told lots of stories. There was lots of nostalgia about CODESA. And he spoke very openly about the strategy, what was important, how he genuinely felt that the ANC was going to get 56% in the elections, how it was a horror show watching the results coming in. And he spoke candidly about his relationship with John Steenhuisen, how the magic is lacking, what it's like to deal with the Democratic Alliance. And I thought he was quite deliberate and intentional about what he was saying, because he wanted to get a message across.
It's fascinating, and I couldn't imagine being in that position. It's fascinating. So I wanted to ask. So you've mentioned the DA, you've mentioned the PA, you've mentioned the ANC. Did you speak to all political parties? Was everybody open to have a discussion?
So I tried to speak to as many political parties. I couldn't speak to all of them just because of time constraints. I really wanted to speak to the EFF and MK. I tried to speak to Julius Malema. I put in a request to speak to Jacob Zuma and various other EFF and MK people. And they were, how shall I put this? Very clear in that they would not speak to me, some of them. So Floyd Shivambu said no. And I said, well, if you change your mind, let me know. And he said, I will not be changing my mind. With the others, it just, I was blue ticked or there was avoidance. And I really would have liked to speak to them because I think that this period in our history is important. And I wasn't writing a book that was in favor of the GNU or against the GNU. I wanted to tell the full story. And the story of MK in the elections was one of the key storylines. The fact that you had this party that was 6 months old, that got 45% of the votes in KZN. It became the third most popular party in the country. And I think that's an important part of the story that needed to be told is what was happening. And then also the fact that KZN was very much on a knife edge. You had Jacob Zuma making threats at the electoral centre, the results centre, and the fact that if the government hadn't have been formed in 14 days, if we couldn't get a government in KZN, what would have happened? We've seen the July unrest a couple of years ago. That could have been repeated. So there was a lot to unpack there.
But they still feature. So
Sure.
That story still features, and you still bring it in, perhaps through other stories from other ministers.
So I spoke to Advocate Dali Mpofu, SC, and he gave really good insight into the Progressive Caucus, which was this other voting bloc that was being established in parallel to the government of national unity, and the conversations that were taking place at Jacob Zuma's Forest Town home with the EFF. So he gave me a lot of insight into that. Bantu Holomisa spoke to me about that. Zwanele Nihonso from the PAC spoke about that. So I try and give as much insight into the different parties, the different factions, the different meetings that took place, so that people can get a full picture and understanding of what happened.
You did have to remove some stuff out of the book, and you mentioned this at your book launch. There were a couple of swear words
Yeah. Listen, there's still a lot of swear words, but I had more than one politician politely ask me to remove some F-bombs. The one told me that their mother would be reading it, and they didn't want to sound like a sailor. Another one was like, I think I used too many F's in that exchange that I described. So yes.
So all the politicians had to sign off that they were happy with what was in the book.
They didn't have to. As a courtesy, it's something I've done throughout my career. Is I always try and make sure that if people have given me the time and have made themselves available, that I ensure that they're quoted properly. And they're satisfied with their quotes. I just think it's good journalistic practice. I don't want anybody to, when the book comes out, to say that they were misquoted, although everything is recorded. So I did allow them to see their quotes beforehand, and some were chilled, others went through it with a fine-toothed comb.
I want to move on to the future. So the book's here. You got to spend time with all of these politicians. What do you think is going to happen we've got elections next year, but then we've got the bigger elections happening in a couple of years too. What do you think is going to happen with the country's sort of political space?
So local government elections are always fascinating because it's about the bread and butter issues, right? It's the stuff that really matters to South Africans. It's about running water in taps. It's about electricity, about refuse collection, potholes, service delivery at local government level. So that's the stuff that really, really makes a difference in the lived experience of South Africans. So I think that what happens at local government level is going to be a hell of a thing to watch. Also because we're in coalition country. So we are seeing more of the big metros being governed by coalitions. So that means that these parties are going to have to find a way to work together, and often that has a negative connotation in this country because there's so much horse trading and there's so much disagreement over all of that. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think Joburg's going to be the place to watch, with Helen Zille vying to be the mayor, and it's going to be interesting to see who the ANC puts up as a mayoral candidate against Helen Zille, because it has to be somebody out of the box.
Yeah.
It can't be the incumbent in Dada Morero. So I think that's going to be interesting. I do hope that South Africans get more passionate and more excited and more interested in voting. At the moment, we have such a low voter turnout. The voter apathy is huge. So out of 42 million eligible voters, so we have 62 million South Africans, 42 million eligible voters, we only had like 12 million people voting in the last local government elections, which is really low. So I do hope people get more invested and more active in politics. In terms of the GNU, I think it's like an unhappy marriage where the parents are staying together for the kids.
And the kids are us.
The kids are us. The kids are you and me and everybody watching this, because they're staying together in the interests of the country. Because we want stability, we want our economy to grow, we want job creation, we want service delivery, we want a reduction in violent crime. So I think that that's the reason that the GNU is staying together. Whether or not it stays together beyond the next elections is, I think, going to be determined by succession in the ANC and the DA and other parties. So who becomes the next leader in the ANC? It goes to an electoral conference in 2027. The DA goes to an electoral conference next year. So I think that's going to determine the future of the country.
I think it's going to be interesting to watch, and everybody needs to watch it and get involved and become a little bit more politically skilled. You've developed a talk that has come from this book. So from the book, you are going to be getting on stages around the country, retelling these stories.
Yeah, so I want to tell these stories, which I tell in the book, but also what I want to do is remind people about how we frame our narrative. And it's something we talk about a lot, but I think it's important that we share the South African story, but what is that story? So if you had to tell the story of South Africa right now, what would it be? And if you had to tell the story of South Africa in 5 to 10 years' time, what story do you want to tell about South Africa? And I think that in telling this story about the GNU, it does frame a certain narrative of the country. But I think that we can look at things in different ways. And I know that I always tease you for being rose-tinted glasses and rainbows and unicorns. But I do think that we need to reframe the narrative. We're so quick to say all police officers are corrupt, and you watch the Madlanga inquiry and what's happening there. All prosecutors are useless. You look at the extraction networks and the construction mafia, and it's very easy to focus on that. But there are also good news stories to tell about South Africa, as the good things guy will tell you, but not just in a rainbows and unicorns way, in a very serious way. You know, getting off the FATF grey list is a perfect example of that. And looking at the turnaround at Eskom with load shedding. So for me, it's about reframing the South African narrative.
It's an important narrative to reframe. We need to look at the country differently. The way we see the world defines the choices we make. And if we're making choices in a state of fear, that's very different to a state of hope.
Yeah.
Mandy, I love you, and I'm so thankful for you, and I love this book. And I love what you're doing in South Africa. I think it's so important.
Thank you. And it's great to have an opportunity to talk to you, talk to your audiences, get on stage with you. The good things guy, the bad things girl. You know, that's how we frame it. But I like to think that you're rubbing off on me. So there's a lot of there's a lot of great stories to tell: active citizenship, civil society, turnarounds at our state-owned entities. Yes, there's a lot of bad. It's easy to focus on unemployment and a lack of economic growth, and those problems are very important. But I think that we need perspective.
We need perspective. If you want to get some perspective, especially in the political space, or just to understand what was going on behind the scenes, this book is so interesting. You can get it at all leading bookstores, so exclusive books everywhere else.
And independent bookstores.
And if you want to get hold of Mandy to book her for a talk, please do. Your web address.
MandyWiener.com.
It's that simple. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Like I say, every single show, okay. Love you, bye.